Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharani Nirvishesha Shanyavari Vaskacharya Satarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sri Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I cannot speak long because I'm actually supposed to be over on the main stage at 4:15. I was thinking about what to speak on when I heard different topics about sannyas. Of course, there's Lord Chaitanya's acceptance of sannyas, but I was also thinking about some verses that were spoken by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Two very well-known verses that were composed by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, and they're cited in Chaitanya Charitamrita. I wanted to read them and then speak a little bit from them. And I'll connect it to sannyas also. Actually, he was a kshetra sannyas. So, although he was a householder, he was actually a kshetra sannyas. He refused to leave Jagannath Puri. But, neither here nor there. The verses of Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga, Sikshartam Eka Purusha Purana, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Sharirabhari, Kripam Buddhya Yastamaham Prabhajya. So let me take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, who has descended in the form of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to teach us real knowledge, his devotional service, and detachment from whatever does not foster Krishna consciousness. He has descended because he is an ocean of transcendental mercy. Let me surrender unto his lotus feet. The second verse is Kalan Nashtam Bhakti Yogam Lichinga Pradhushkartam Krishna Chaitanya Nama Avyarbhutas Tasya Padara Vinde Gadham Diyatam Chittavrinda. Let my consciousness, which is like a honeybee, take shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has just now appeared as Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to teach the ancient system of devotional service to himself. This system had almost been lost due to the influence of time. Purport. As Lord Krishna states in the Bhagavad Gita, Yada Yada Hi Dharmasya Glanya Bhavati Bharata Abhyutanam Adharmasya Tadatmanam Shijamyaham. Whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharata, and the predominant rise in irreligion, at that time I descend myself. This is also the case with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in this world as a disguised incarnation of Krishna, but his appearance is confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam, the Mahabharata, and other Vedic scriptures. He appeared in order to teach the fallen souls in this material world, for in this age of Kali, almost everyone has become attached to fruitive and ritualistic activities and mental speculation. Consequently, there was a great need to revive the system of devotional service. The Lord himself personally came down disguised as a devotee so that the fallen populace might take advantage of the Lord's example. At the conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna advised complete surrender unto him, promising all protection to his devotee. Unfortunately, people are so fallen that they cannot accept the instructions of Lord Krishna. Therefore, Krishna returned with the same mission, but he executed it in a different way. As Lord Shri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he ordered us to surrender unto himself. But as Lord Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he taught us how to surrender to Krishna. Therefore he is praised by the Goswamis, Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Premapadayate. Lord Shri Krishna is certainly the personality of Godhead, but he is not as magnanimous as Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Lord Krishna simply gave orders for one to become his devotee, Manmana Bhava Mad Bhakta, but Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually taught the process of Krishna consciousness. If one wants to become a devotee of Krishna, he must first take shelter of the lotus feet of Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, following in the footsteps of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and other exalted devotees. It's interesting that these verses were composed by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. If we take into consideration his position prior to the composition of these verses, who's known as the reservoir of all bad logic, he was totally influenced by Mayavad philosophy. Although he was a very learned scholar, and it's described how Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, his father was Maheshwara Visharada, who was also a scholar, had a school. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said that he went to Mithila to study Nyaya and Vedanta there. And at that time, they had a sort of like a stranglehold in there at that place of the teachings of Nyaya, which is logic and argument and Vedanta. And the students weren't allowed to write anything, or no books were there. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had gone there and to learn these topics. And he was such a learned person that everything that he heard, he memorized. And then he later went and opened up a school. I think it was in Navadvip for some time, and then he moved to Puri and opened up a school in Jagannath Puri. And it was there in Jagannath Puri that he had taken Kshetra Sannyas, and he would vow to never leave Puri. Some people say that he memorized everything, and then he went and opened the school, and he wrote everything down from memory and used that as material for teaching his students. Said elsewhere also that he learned from his father, Maheshwara Visharada, and that was the basis of his knowledge. But nonetheless, his knowledge was that of Nyaya, logic and argument, and Vedanta with an impersonal understanding. And nonetheless, although that was his background, of course, Gaura Dashtapika also explains that Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was actually Brihaspati, who actually had come to assist the Lord in his pastimes. Yesterday we were giving class about the appearance of Lord Chaitanya, explaining how the Lord had requested certain devotees to precede him. Krishna himself had made a personal request. He asked Jagannath Mishra, he asked Sachimata, he asked Madhavendra Puri, he asked Ishwara Puri, he asked Pundarik Vijayanidhi. All of them, they came and they descended before him, Haridas Thakur, and they took birth in various places. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya also is explained here as Brihaspati, who came to assist the Lord in his pastimes. Nonetheless, as we were saying, that it's interesting to note that these verses that he composed, Kaviraj Goswami states about these verses, he says, these two verses composed by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya will always declare his name and fame as loudly as a pounding drum, for they have become pearl necklaces around the necks of all devotees. Such is the nature of these verses. Prabhupada oftentimes quoted this verse, Radha Gavija Nija Bhakti Yoga, Sikshate Purusha Purnima, Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Sarya Radha, Kripambudya Yastamaham Bhakti. Glorifies the Lord. Now when he wrote these verses, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya wanted to actually bring these verses and give them to Lord Chaitanya. And first he brought them and he gave them to Lord Chaitanya. He was staying in Puri, he was staying there with Jagadananda was present. And I think Mukundadat was also present. And he showed these verses to them and said, can you please deliver these verses to the Lord? Now the Lord, of course, as Prabhupada explains in the purport, he appeared as Chana avatar. He was a hidden incarnation. His mood was always that of a devotee of the Lord. And he did not want to in any way, shape or form hear that he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And knowing that, when Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya showed these two verses to Mukundadat and Jagadananda and asked him to bring it in, Mukundadat was thinking, when the Lord sees these verses, I don't know, I can't predict what he's going to do with them. So he took the two verses which were on a palm leaf, and he wrote them down on the side of the hut that Lord Chaitanya was staying in, these verses. And then Jagadananda brought the verses into the hut, showed them to the Lord looked at them, and he immediately tore them up. Didn't want to hear it. Didn't want to hear it. And there are many cases of this also. In Chaitanya Bhagavat there's a nice description also of Advaita Acharya, that one time he was having a kirtan. And when he saw Lord Chaitanya, he decided to start glorifying Lord Chaitanya as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and glorifying his names, although previously they had been engaged in chanting Krishna's names. But at this particular time, when Advaita Acharya saw the Lord, he decided, now I'm going to start chanting the names of Gauranga. So he started chanting the names very loudly, and he was surrounded by all the devotees, and the devotees were very intimidated. They're thinking, what's going to happen when Lord Chaitanya hears this? You know, he's not going to like it. But they looked at Advaita Acharya, and Advaita Acharya was like chanting the names ferociously like a lion, very loudly. And when they looked at him, they saw his audacity to chant Gauranga's names in this way. They started to get some confidence. So they started chanting along with him. And when Lord Chaitanya heard them, he immediately went, and he left that place, and he went into the room and he closed the door. And Advaita Acharya with all the devotees, they followed him to the room, still chanting the names of Gauri, Gauranga, Gauranga, Gauranga. And they opened the door, and Lord Chaitanya didn't want to hear it. But still he kept on chanting loudly, loudly, and there was some conversation. I think it was Srivas Pandit who put his hands up. And he said, Lord Chaitanya said, no, why are you doing this? Why are you chanting these names? And Srivas put his hand up and put his hand in front of the Lord. He said, what does this mean? He says, just like if you try to block the sun with your hand, it's impossible. So it's in the same way, you're trying to hide yourself, but we know who you are. You could not hide. We know you're that same personality who was invited by Advaita Acharya to come to this world to deliver the fallen souls. This is your actual identity. Please don't try to hide it from us. We can see who you are. Of course, Lord Chaitanya, he had to accept it, but that was his mood. He didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to hear that he was the Supreme Personality, but his mood was always that. And as we were reading yesterday, we were speaking at the Vaishnava Academy, and when Lord Chaitanya was, when Lord Krishna actually was speaking, and he was describing his own purpose for which he wanted to come. He said, I want to come as a devotee and teach devotional service by my example. Because if he can teach by his example, then this is, and then Prabhupada speaks about this point in the purport we just read also, that Lord Chaitanya was even more magnanimous than Krishna himself, because when Krishna came, he said, Savardhamam Puritaja, Mamikam Saranam Braja. When Krishna came, he demanded that you surrender. But Lord Chaitanya, he took away that condition, and he taught by his example what real surrender is. And as we know what real surrender is, when Krishna says, Savadhamam Purichaja Mamikam Saranam Vraja in Bhagavad Gita, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that all the components of that surrender were in the previous verse. Man mana bhava madbhakta madhyajima mamasturu. To always think of me, worship me, offer your homages unto me, surely you'll come to me. So Lord Chaitanya, he's even more magnanimous than Krishna himself, because Krishna set the condition, and first you surrender, but Lord Chaitanya simply came to teach by his example what is surrender. And he explains in Chaitanya Charitamrita and Adi Leela, and there's very many verses which explain very clearly that how can one teach devotional service if he doesn't practice it himself? How will I teach? I have to practice it myself. Otherwise, who will follow? And he quotes various verses from the Bhagavad Gita. Yad yada charati sheshtas tadhare veturojana sayat pamanam kurute lokastaranduvartate. That whatever actions are performed by great men, then common men will follow in his footsteps. Whatever standards he sets by his exemplary acts, all the world pursues. And he says, when I come, and then I have to teach by example, because if I don't teach by my example, then the whole world will be put to ruination if everybody will follow my example. So these verses are given by Kaviraj Goswami in explaining what was Krishna's mood prior to his appearance. And that's why he decided to come again, as Prabhupada said in the purport. This time he came again as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but with a different purpose, a different method for teaching surrender, than Lord Krishna, simply by his words. Lord Chaitanya taught by his example. So, therefore, he was always in the mood of a devotee, and except for the very short time that he revealed his divinity during the Mahaprakash Leela in the house of Srivas Thakur, when he stood on the altar and he gave benedictions to the different devotees and revealed his actual identity at that time. Generally, he did not expose so much his divinity, except his devotees. They recognized, they knew, such as we just explained before, they knew who he was. But even in the very beginning when the Lord appeared, although he asked all his associates to come to this world, and associates took birth at various places to purify those places, and they all came to Navadvip, it's explained that the associates of the Lord, although they were eternal associates of the Lord, they didn't even know who each other were. They didn't, when they came together and they were actually discussing Krishna Katha, they didn't know who these personalities were in this, by Yoga Maya potency. They didn't know. They didn't know who the Lord was. Even in the way to the Acharya, he didn't recognize his Lord. When at the way to the Acharya, when young Nimai would come to get his brother Vishwarup to take him from hearing Hari Katha from Advaita Acharya, when he was preaching the glories of devotional service. And when young Nimai would come and tell him it's time to go home, brother. Mata's calling, it's time for lunch. Please come. And as Vrindavan Das Thakur says that when Nimai would come to that place, how was he dressed? He was clothed by the four directions. But so attractive. So attractive. A little baby, young Nimai. And when Advaita Acharya, he would look at young Nimai, he became so captivated by his beauty that he became stunned. He couldn't speak. He stopped speaking. And everybody else who saw them, they just became stunned by his beauty. And Advaita Acharya began looking within his heart, what is it about this child that's so attractive to my heart? What is it? Although he was the same person who called him to come. He called him by offering Tulsi and Ganges to Shalagam Shiva. He understood that at the particular time people were so much absorbed in this Nyaya, this logic and argument, study of the Vedanta, but it's actually described in Chaitanya Bhagavat, people were studying Shastras, but their only purposes for studying Shastras was to get into arguments. That's all. That was their goal, that was their objective. Who can defeat who? I have a better guru than you have, because I can defeat you, and you can't defeat me, therefore my guru is better. And this was their whole enthusiasm for studying Shastras, to get into argument, and to see who could defeat who. And Vrindavan Das Thakur says that even though so much Shastra was spoken, the word bhakti never came out of anyone's mouth. This was the situation. This was the situation at that time. And he also says, Vrindavan Das Thakur also states that when people come together for large gatherings, usually it was for weddings and birthdays. That was it. And then, although they were engaged in worship, they all worshiped the goddess Chandi for material benefits. This was the situation that Advaita Acharya was seeing, and he understood that I don't think I can do anything to deliver these people, only if I can bring Krishna himself. Krishna himself must come. If I can invoke him to come, then certainly because only Krishna can bestow this kind of devotional service to the fallen people in this age. So, although Advaita Acharya invoked, and Lord Chaitanya many times says, and it's stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita, that one of the purposes for Lord Chaitanya's descent was to answer the call of Advaita Acharya. He had his internal purposes that he had to fulfill, but he also had his external purposes. It was the congregational chanting of the holy name of the Lord, to relish the sweet taste of the holy name of the Lord, and also to answer the call of Advaita Acharya. So Advaita Acharya called him, but he didn't recognize his Lord. Didn't know. He was covered. Of course, in the beginning, not many people knew about his identity. So, therefore, when Lord Chaitanya saw these verses on the palm leaf, he tore them up. Because he didn't want them to, it says right there, I glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, who's come as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's come to teach devotion to himself. He's come to teach detachment from anything that doesn't foster Krishna consciousness. He's come to teach devotional service. He is an ocean of transcendental mercy. Many verses in Chaitanya Charitamrita describe Lord Chaitanya as this ocean of transcendental mercy. Kaviraj Goswami, in one of his invocation verses in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he glorifies Lord Chaitanya as, let me offer my obeisance to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is an ocean of transcendental mercy. And although the subject of bhakti is very difficult to understand, Lord Chaitanya is so merciful that he made bhakti so easily accessible in his age of Kali. How did he make it so easily accessible? Sometimes we foolishly think that the way to make bhakti easily accessible is to package it in a way that's attractive. This is how people think that this is how to make bhakti easily accessible. Let's package it so people will be attracted. But what is Kaviraj Goswami? How did Lord Chaitanya make it so easily accessible? He made it so easily accessible because he was practicing it fully himself. And therefore people seeing his devotion, people seeing his tears from his eyes, people seeing his taste for the holy name of the Lord, people seeing his ecstatic symptoms, simply by seeing, people became devotees of the Lord. This is how he made it accessible, because he practiced it himself. Krishna himself had to come to bring that mercy and to practice it himself, to teach others. This is what love of Godhead is. This kind of attachment to the holy name, this kind of attachment, this mood of surrender and service. And then this verse that we also read, let my consciousness, which is like a honeybee, take shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has just now appeared as Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to teach the ancient system of devotional service to himself. Uh-oh, I forgot. Hare Krishna. I wanted to say something else. I wanted to get to the sannyas part, because topic was about sannyas. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, if you remember, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, when Lord Chaitanya went to Jagannath Puri, and as he was entering Jagannath Puri, first place he went to the Jagannath temple, and when he went to the Jagannath temple, he fell down in ecstatic trance upon seeing Lord Jagannath, and it was Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya who made an arrangement to take Lord Chaitanya to his home, and he was concerned about this young sannyasi, and gradually Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was thinking that, well, maybe what is it, what are the symptoms that he's manifesting? He put cotton under his nose and he began to perceive that actually that it's probably that he was experiencing ecstatic symptoms. Then there was a whole, gradually when Nityananda and Haridas Thakur and others came, they also came behind Lord Chaitanya. They went to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's house on the request of Gopinathacharya, and Gopinathacharya then had a discussion with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, and Gopinathacharya not only had a discussion, but he was very disturbed because Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had made a suggestion after that this young sannyasi, he has taken the vows of sannyas from an inferior sampradaya, who was taking the sannyas. When he heard his previous situation from Gopinathacharya, because he asked Gopinathacharya, tell me, what is the previous situation of this sannyasi? And Gopinathacharya said, well, he was actually the son of Jagannath Mishra and Sachimata, and his what was his relationship with Nilambar Chakravarti? It was the father of his mother, Sachimata's. Yeah. And Nilambar Chakravarti was an associate of Maheshwara Visharada, who was the father of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And he began to describe his previous situation. He also began to describe from whom he took sannyas, from Keshava Bharati. And then, when Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya heard his previous situation, he said, actually he's taken sannyas from an inferior sampradaya, from the Bharati sampradaya. What would be better is if he takes sannyas again from me, I'll give him his cloth, and he can take sannyas in a superior sampradaya. And in this way, he presented this as a proposal to Gopinath Acharya, and when Gopinath Acharya heard it, he said, you don't understand. This is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and there's no question of any external formalities required for him, for his sannyas. And why are you making such a suggestion? And then there was an argument that ensued that how Gopinath Acharya was trying to convince him on what basis he had ascertained that he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the students of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya were giving him their evidence, and they were saying, what evidence do you have that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead? And they went back and forth in the different types of evidence, and of course the result was that Gopinathacharya, although he presented all the evidence clearly how he could understand that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, nonetheless Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was still of the same opinion and did not change. Of course, Lord Chaitanya, he understood Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's mentality, and later there was a discussion between Lord Chaitanya and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Lord Chaitanya expressed total humility in the presence of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. He actually treated him as a superior person and submitted himself to be instructed by him. And when he submitted himself to be instructed by him, then a conversation ensued. And there's a very interesting conversation, part of this conversation, which is not Chaitanya Charitamrita, but it's in Chaitanya Bhagavat. And I wanted to read these verses because it was what Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said about sannyas. Now, of course, we know Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was speaking about, and Indradumna Maharaj also alluded to it, that Mayavad sannyas. Because it was Mayavad sannyas, which was actually what everybody was accepting at the time. And even Lord Chaitanya, he had his Ekadanda, and he did that, of course. He took sannyas in order to attract everybody in this way. But nonetheless, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was giving various arguments of why you taking sannyas. And they're very nice, interesting quotes about sannyas that I wanted to read. Is from Chaitanya Bhagavat, and they are, it's in the, I think it's Anshya Leela. Chapter 3, yeah, Anshya Leela. There's a conversation. It said that by the arrangement of providence, the Lord one day sat down in a solitary place with Sarvabhauma. The Lord said, "Listen, Sarvabhauma Mahashaya, let me reveal my heart to you. Although I came to see Jagannath, my main purpose here was to meet you. Will Jagannath speak to me? It is you who will completely destroy my material bondage." This is Lord Chaitanya speaking. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. You are fully empowered by Lord Krishna, so you were able to award one loving devotional service to Krishna. This is, of course, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta in his Tika gives a very interesting point here. He says, realizing that Sarvabhauma's desire for the four objectives of life was simply deceitful, Sri Gaurasundar also deceitfully told him that he had come to Nilachala to take instruction from Sarvabhauma, and that Sarvabhauma had the power to bestow on one loving devotional service to Krishna. Then Lord Chaitanya says, therefore I take shelter of you, do whatever you consider is beneficial for me. What rules and regulations should I follow? How should I live? Please instruct me so that I do not fall into the well of material life. As we know Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he was very, very concerned that he's very young. How can he make such vows of sannyas and be renounced? He should hear Vedanta from me so he can become sufficiently renounced. That's what he was thinking. Such a young man, such an attractive man. And he was saying, with beauty like yours, how do you think you're going to stay celibate? Everybody's going to be attracted to you. He was giving such kind of arguments. Of course, we just heard today that devotees took sannyas at a very young age. Nonetheless, we see they have Mahaprabhu's mercy. They kept their vows because of their attachment to Lord Chaitanya and the service of Lord Chaitanya. So he says, what rules and regulations should I follow? How should I live? Please instruct me so that I do not fall into the well of material life. Please instruct me without reservation. Know for certain that I am a soul surrendered to you. In this way, Gaurahari used various means to delude Sarvabhauma while speaking to him. Without realizing the Lord's intention, Sarvabhauma began to speak about the religious duties of living entities. Sarvabhauma said, I appreciate everything you have said. Of course, he didn't say, no, I'm not so advanced. I appreciate everything you said. Interesting. The devotion that has awakened in you is certainly most wonderful and beyond description. You have attained Krishna's mercy, but you have done one thing that is improper. Although you are most intelligent, why did you take sannyas? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says in his Tika, Sarvabhauma said, "O Krishna Chaitanya, you have attained Krishna's mercy and you are most intelligent. So why did you take sannyas? What qualification do you have to take sannyas? You're too young." Personalities like Madhavaji Puri have taken sannyas, but they have done so after maturely enjoying material life. Before accepting sannyas, you should have particularly considered that everyone respects a sannyasi as a member of the topmost ashram. Since you have accepted Vaishnava principles which entail becoming humbler than a blade of grass, what need was there to become a candidate for receiving the highest respect found in social etiquette? Giving up shika and Brahmin thread is an example of pride. It is simply the desire to ascend to the highest level of fame. A person following Vaishnava principles should offer obeisances to a dog eater, a cow, and an ass, and he should not accept respect from anyone. Interesting how Sri Ramaraj said that's the one possession that a sannyasi has. As Prabhupada said that also, is respect. If he loses respect, how can he preach? Of course, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is speaking this way because he didn't know the glories of Vaishnava sannyas. What to speak of the glories of Vaishnava sannyas, who later converted Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya into the greatest Vaishnava, although he was a reservoir of all bad logic, and who composed his verses, Vairagya Vijja Bhakti Yoga, as a result of Lord Chaitanya's complete humility, who sat there for 7 days and continuously listened to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya recite Vedanta for 7 continuous days. And then after 7 days, Sarvabhauma said, "Why have you not said anything? At least can you give me some indication that you've understood something? And if you haven't understood that, you must have some questions." But Lord Chaitanya said, although I've been listening to what you said, I have had a difficult listening to you. I'm listening to the Vedanta, but you've clouded the whole you've clouded the Vedanta with your own interpretations, and therefore I cannot hear you. Anyways, this Lord Chaitanya was always manifesting this respectful attitude, and therefore he sat and he listened. So therefore, a person following Vaishnava principles should offer obeisance to a dog eater, a cow, and an ass. Should not accept respect from anyone. Mayavadi sannyasis in particular consider themselves equal to the Supreme Lord, who is the creator, maintainer, and annihilator. Therefore, they are unworthy sons and foolish. And then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya says, just consider, what is the use of accepting sannyas? One immediately becomes bound by the ropes of false ego. One who carries a danda considers himself a great person and does not fold his hands before anyone. A sannyasi is not afraid to accept obeisances from such a personality that the Vedas declare the dust of his feet should be respected. False ego is never good. Try to understand the words of Srimad Bhagavatam in this regard. Realizing that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has entered the body of every living entity, as the Supersoul, one should offer obeisances before all, even the dogs, outcasts, cows, and asses falling flat upon the ground like a rod. You should offer full obeisances to all living entities, including the Brahmins, dogs, and dog-eaters. Vaishnava etiquette is to offer respects to everyone, but one who is a hypocrite has no attachment for this. The only gain in giving up one's shika and Brahmin thread is that respectable people offer one their obeisances. This is the first loss in accepting sannyas. Now hear about the other loss by which one's intelligence becomes polluted. course, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is trying to convince Lord Chaitanya that he shouldn't have, in these verses, that you shouldn't have taken sannyas in this way. You're too young and you may fall from your position. But Lord Chaitanya, of course, as we know by his perfect example of complete renunciation, Vairagya Vijnanija Bhakti Yoga, because he taught devotional service, he taught everyone how to become attached to the lotus feet of the Lord. He taught everyone by his example how to achieve complete renunciation, by becoming attached from anything that material that doesn't foster Krishna consciousness. How did he do this? Because he gave the higher taste. With a conception of sannyas to renounce this world, understanding that this world, was it you that quoted the verse? Anasaktasya vishayam yataham upayanjata nirvanda Krishna sabhade yuktam varagi muchite. Prabhupada would oftentimes quote the verse that one who renounces things without understanding their relationship with the Supreme Personality of God can never be as complete in his renunciation as one who sees everything connected to Krishna and uses everything for Krishna's service. So Lord Chaitanya, he taught the ideal principle of renunciation. He taught the ideal position of sannyas by his example. And he was able to convert even the most hard-hearted logician who was attached to logic and argument and study of Vedanta with an impersonal conception to become a lover of Krishna. So much did he become a lover of Krishna that he even tried to suggest to Lord Chaitanya later. He says, there's one verse I read in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Tatenu kapam sushamikshmano bhujana ivatma kritam vibhakam pridvagva prabhirvidanam namaste jiveti yo mukti pade sadaya bhak. And he tried to make a proposal to Lord Chaitanya because he became such an ecstatic lover of Godhead that when he heard this word mukti, immediately what arose in his heart was anger. Mukti. Something's wrong. I suggest we change this word from mukti to bhakti. And he wanted to make this recommendation to Lord Chaitanya that this mukti pade is not proper. It should say bhakti pade. Of course, Lord Chaitanya convinced them that actually mukti pade means mukti pad, that all liberations take shelter at the lotus feet of Krishna. And therefore he is known as mukti pad. And therefore we're saying that actually mukti pade is actually speaking of Krishna. There's another example, explanation he gave for mukti pad. Do you remember what it was? He gave to ultimate mukti is devotional service. Yes. Ultimate mukti is devotional service. So, although Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya wanted to change mukti pade to bhakti pade, and nonetheless Lord Chaitanya, by his mercy, he was able to convert Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya into the personality who would compose these two wonderful verses about Lord Chaitanya, which would be heard and resounded throughout the world just like a pounding drum. And the glories of Lord Chaitanya, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is a little bit about the pastimes of the Lord, his appearance, his purpose for his appearance, and we thought we would present a little bit about sannyas, because the topic of a sannyasi was also spoken about today. And then although Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's instructions were very relevant, but they did not know the power of devotional service, that for a devotee of the Lord who sees the Lord in everyone's heart, for a devotee of the Lord who's always attached, etam sa astaya paratmanishtam, because he's paratmanishtam, he's always fully engaged in the service of the lotus feet of Mukunda. He will not fall down if he's always fully taking shelter of the lotus feet of Mukunda, seeing Krishna in everyone's heart and preaching Krishna consciousness with full enthusiasm. Lord Chaitanya himself, when he was wandering throughout Radhadesh, even himself he would quote this verse from the Avanti Brahman, Etam sa astaya paratmanishtam, glorifying the paratmanishta, which means the full engagement in devotional service, full meditation on the lotus feet of Mukunda. And this was established by all the previous authorities that this is the best platform of renunciation. This is real sannyas. So I've spoken a little bit longer than I probably should have, but I think I'm we're going to be late for the kirtana on the stage. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna.